think I fell in love with the place from that first day.
It's an opportunity for us to manage and interpret the ongoing story of our nation.
St Helena on the shipping map was marked with a conspicuous pine, where you'd look for that pine as it stuck up on bad weather or the clouds were low. You could almost always see St Helena, and that was something you would aim for when you were trying to get home.
Each of these men had a story to tell. There's crimes of passion, crimes of religion. There's doctors, there's solicitors, there's politicians, every walk of life. But I don't think St Helena is a place of horror. I think for a lot of these men it was just their home. Goods that were manufactured at St Helena were being sent to Bogger Road Jail or orphanages, or the lepers on Peel Island were getting some of the produce. It was self-sufficient. They truly made that island a showcase, not only for the Queensland government but for Australia. I'd be devastated if it disappeared.
Myths tell of how the name St Helena was given to the island when a Quandamooka man with the nickname of Napoleon was banished there as a temporary punishment for theft. He didn't seem to stay there long. It's told that when he got sick of being punished, he just paddled back to Quandamooka. Later on, during the 1860s, it's told, a demand for dugong oil as a medicinal cure-all generated a small industry there. During that time, local white racketeers captured some of the women and children of local indigenous peoples in order to make their menfolk hunt for the dugongs whose patterns of eating the seagrass beds they knew so well. The tale goes on to tell about how it seemed at first these men were willingly going along with this enforced captivity, until one by one the men who were the white racketeers living on St Helena and capturing the dugongs and cutting them up and taking their oil seemed to disappear. although, like all parts of the history, it's shrouded in myth and conjecture. The area's waters are still rich in marine life, and its soil still provides sustenance for a range of species that are both native and increasingly now more introduced. In 1867, the St Helena penal establishment was created as a high security prison. The prison stones were hewn from the strange friable shell and sandstone blocks from the island itself and mortared with lime produced by burning coral. These stones still remain, bearing traces of the seabed in which they once lay and of the work of the men who fashioned them. What we wanted for this installation performance event was that the people who came across to the island actually felt involved in the whole performance themselves. We were aware that the projections we were using, the fact that we were using the old walls and the spaces of the island itself, they were kind of characters, and the people that we brought over to the island were to act as characters of another kind. When the people come off the boat, they walk along a long pier and the sun is setting. And the first wall they come across is the wall of the old boat shed.
This was the hardest space for me to get my head around, because we had this beautiful thing. We walk in and we arrive on the island. It's sunset and we're seeing this, I think, a very magical installation work.
We projected Laura McCabe onto that wall.
It just keeps repeating. It's sort of like a cycling.
Her imagery called Dugong Dreaming.
Never-ending greenness, opaque feeling of the water and the land coming together.
As the group of visitors arrived, the musical piece that we were playing was a piece called Animal Prelude by Ash Dargan.
A very fine Queensland didge player. He'd had that sense of exploring the sounds of different animals and birds and aquatic life around Brisbane.
Viewers could see in the background the faces of the St Helena inmates. And Tony and Donna Hamilton had gone into the archives of the inmates of St Helena and taken photographs of those old photographs that recorded who those inmates were, how tall they were, what they'd been jailed for, and how long they stayed there. So they'd taken their photographs, and they'd also taken photographs of the handwriting of the wardens who would take their details. And they brought these together in an art piece that faded in and out, so that the eyes of the men looked right back at you from the prison walls.
And then we get into that space where we had Punji playing frenetic music with his sticks and that.
The storeroom is the only building on the island that actually has a roof over it, and it's good because the roof is a floating roof, and the members of the EPA have built that roof to preserve the very crumbling walls there.
Basically I got the sounds of stones and sticks and poles and everything in that central workspace, and it blew me away. I wrote a piece of music with it that night. I was so inspired.
It's rather a beautiful building, and of all the buildings it perhaps seems the most haunted.
In asking Tunji, I was very interested to see how he would respond compared to how I responded, because I responded with my hands. And I can play percussion to some extent, but I'm not like Tunji, who that's what he does, you know.
It was also the place from which Morse code was tapped out in communication behind the walls, across the sea and to the mainland.
We were able to have a rehearsal where we actually looked at them basically constructing a piece of music. He played it, he improvised it, but I was able to be maybe a slight guiding force around it, which is a very nice way for composers to work. But just saying, look, I'm the tide, but you're the water.
That was in the same room as an animation called Unloading the Wagon, made by Amy Crossingham and William James. What they did with that animation was just simply show the tracks of the animals, the dray horses that backed up unloading those heavy bags on the little railway that would dump those provisions. The animation was projected onto the floor of the storeroom as if it was ghosts from the past. So you can see scurrying mouse traps, a slithering snake, just the marks of their bodies touching that sand again. One of the other projections in that room on that night were animations by Danica Catchpole and Xuning Tang, and their animation was called Prisoners Labouring and Tools of the Trade, and they captured again just the shadows of the prisoners from the past. So in none of the animations that we made were there actually depictions of what they were there. They were just traces of what had gone on there beforehand. And certainly that room, I guess, was filled with that presence of men's labour.
But then other spaces had, people literally finding the pieces of music in there. That's how Nick and Julian worked. They basically went into the places and improvised and wrote pieces together over an afternoon. That's a great way to work.
After the viewers left the storeroom and then walked up, they walk up slightly towards the eastern end of the island. On that rise, the chief warder's kitchen still stands. And that kitchen art house was a place that at one time employed the services of Chinese workers.
Then I started to talk to one of my colleagues, Nicholas Ng, who's the research fellow in Chinese music.
Chinese and South Sea Island workers in colonial Queensland were often treated with a fair degree of prejudice.
He plays all these weird Chinese instruments. They're not really that weird, but, they're weird compared to cellos.
In that very beautiful kitchen, there was a long and almost elegiac performance.
Then Nick had a friend called Julian who was up working on a commission of his, who's also a Chinese musician who plays traditional Chinese flutes, as well as the cello, as well as being actually a modern dancer.
And they actually had built up to that dance performance.
We're sparking off each other.
From having lived 2 nights before that in that kitchen and trying to absorb the kinds of feelings that their forebears might have felt working in that place.
Someone with, the sense of being able to physically embody a reaction to the space as well as play it.
And they too felt that the island was, it was a place of sadness. There was also things to be respectful of and things to be celebrated about those spaces. Now, one of the most interesting things that happened on that night was around the well. Now, there are several wells on the island, but this one particular well is up on the high area behind the major walls. And that well, it is said, goes right down into the bowels of the island and across Moreton Bay, running under the bay itself. And it actually comes through the aquifers in Helena. And when you sing down into that well, it's almost like singing into the belly of the island itself. And that's actually what Kim Cunio did. And he gathered all the people together around him. And he didn't have to do much effort to bring them together, because on that night it was a time when people had to work hard because it was such a time of stress.
And everyone just saw, as good people do, geez, we've got a job to do, we'll just do the job.
Because we've been put to such physical stress.
I could feel the groans from deep inside people's solar plexuses.
And then all the men, it was men, stood around that well and sung down into it. And the result was incredibly haunting.
Fascinating.
bunch of good fellows who banded together. They're known throughout the land. And the thousands of folks who were down on their luck, they have lent a helping hand. The Order of Elks are the men that I mean, and their motto is sweet charity. Their emblem's the head of an elk on a button with 4 letters BPOE. They are the best people on earth. BPOE. They are the people who do the most good. When you're an elk, you will see what they'll do for you. We never will know the half of that charity. Good fellows together in all sorts of weather. The BPOE. At my initiation into the Elks Lodge, I was simply treated grand. Every brother was there with an Indian club to give me a helping hand. I woke up at the doctor's. He thought I'd been hit by an automobile on the head. When I told him I'd nearly been joining the Elks, then he smiled at me sweetly and said, they are the best people on earth. BPOE. They are the folks who do everyone good. Now you're an elk, you can see what they do to you. They've broken your arm. They've fractured your ribs and knees. I'll be busy with you till new members go through in the BPOE. Oh, young brother elk by the name of McCarthy, he ran off with my wife. There was no need to run, for when he took her from me, I was his friend for life. Not 20 years past, he heard I was grieving. His conscience had worried him then. It was then he remembered that I was an elk, so he brought her back to me again. They are the best people on earth. My mother-in-law came back to my wife to me. Now McCarthy's our border, he's one of the Order of BPOE.